Hello, everyone. This is JVL here with not Sarah. Sarah's off. I got Bill Kristol here sitting in for Sarah on The Secret Show. Bill, happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Happy to be here. I've of course, when Sarah does the show, JVL, you have to understand, JVL and Sarah go over the topics at great length. They work out their routines. JVL asked me to do this. I was honored to do so. I kept waiting for that little memo that you get, the 4 or 5 bullet points of what. Nothing. I'm flying blind here, guys. I have no idea.
Got to be fresh.
I have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's good to get the topics fresh eyes. So I want to start with Zoran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, because last night we got word that Cuomo's says he's gonna run again in the general.
Or he might.
I'm skeptical. Yeah, I think he. Well, I think according to what I was reading this morning before we got on this, like his current position is yes, I'm running.
Okay.
I kind of don't think that's gonna hold. Do you?
I've gone back and forth. I don't know. I could see him looking at polling, and I don't think he has to decide. But he is, for better or worse, he's 100% name ID. He could raise money quickly if it comes to it. If he still looks like a viable alternative after Labor Day. So he's basically can sit the summer out, let some of the, I think, bad vibes from his campaign die away, let people focus a little more on Mamdani. He would hope they would be repelled. They might not be, of course. It might be the opposite. And then he can make I think he's in a pretty good position if Mamdani's running at 57%, and then Adams and Cuomo and, what's that other guy, Sliwa, whatever, each at 15 or something.
Curtis,
right? Or at 20, he whatever the math is there, but you know what I mean. It's huge lead for Mamdani. He just says, "No, I'm not doing it." There's the donors, pathetically rally to Adams at the end, and he loses, I think. But you could look at a poll, and Mamdani's sitting at 38%, and suddenly you think if you could muscle Adams, and Cuomo is maybe ahead of Adams, and you muscle him out, and then you reduce Sliwa's vote, you win the final at 43, 41 or something. It's not crazy, I don't think. Actually, I mean, it sounds Cuomo was so. By the end of the primaries, Cuomo was so. No one could stand him, basically, But I don't know. Could that be fixed by just taking a vacation for 3 months? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, part of it is just trying to understand, does he think he's still viable in any way, anywhere? Because, I mean, that would be the final fight. Like, I think he's done as a political commodity, but going in to the general and then losing again would basically mean go away, right? And I guess this is like if he says, yeah, I'm going to stay with it now, but then 12 weeks from now, just, hasn't raised any money and just says, yeah, we thought better of it. We looked at the polling. We don't think there's a path right now. You can still go and do corporate board stuff and whatnot, I guess, right? But if you go in then and finish in third place to Adams and Mamdani, I don't know. Where are you on the Mamdani stuff? Because I am of a couple different minds on him. And I try to disentangle everything from just the fact that he's not a candidate for me. My preferences are not his preferences. I think in general, many of the things he talked about in his campaign are unlikely to work. Some of them are likely to work badly. Others are just likely to be unworkable. But also, it does seem like he really excited people, and maybe the future is not things that I prefer. Right? But, Kamala Harris ran the campaign that I would have scripted for her, and it didn't work out. And maybe that's not how the world works. And maybe that's not where the future is and not what voters want.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm of 5 different minds about it. Not really. I mean, I'm basically of the mind that it would be nice if that massive New York City establishment of donors and powerful people had united behind a respectable, non-left-wing, non-sort of, what the right, anti-Semitic is not fair, I don't think, but let's say, sort of
unwilling to challenge any liberal pieties ever.
Yeah, anti-Israel and anti-Semitic adjacent, candidate. I mean, that would have, if they could unite against the moderate against such a candidate, was that so hard? Was it hard to, in the 8.8 million people in New York City, to find someone to run who was not Andrew Cuomo? There were a couple others running who were reasonable. Incidentally, they didn't choose to unite behind
Landers,
them.
the city comptroller, yeah.
Right, he's a little lefty, but Adams, the city council, I think presidency or something. But anyway,
Adrian Adams, yeah.
yeah. I mean, but they were so pathetic, and Cuomo, he's got money, he's got name ID. I guess we just can't really rally against him. He's a little bit ahead in the polls. This was like 3 months ago, right? They could have poured money in behind someone else, including someone who was a Bloomberg type who wasn't in elective office. They didn't do it because they're so pathetic, the donors and the establishment. I just want to repeat that for the 8th time in case I haven't made that point. And so there they were with Cuomo, you know. So part of me thinks, you guys made your bed, you sleep in it. You know, you live in New York, you deal with some of the foolish policies. A. B, a lot of the policies aren't going to be implemented, even let alone, you know, or they're going to be tried on some small scale. There'll be 5. I mean, the grocery store thing is such a perfect example. If he sets up 5 little grocery stores that are run by the government and charge below market rates, there'll be some slightly negative consequences on neighborhood bodegas. It's stupid. It's one of these typical government programs that you can predict ahead of time. It's not going to be great. On the other hand, it's not the end of the world. I don't think he's even going to do it, honestly. I'm not sure the city council would allow it. The bodegas have quite a lot of lobbying power to get, and to say nothing of the big supermarket chains, against government stores. Also, the pearl clutching about it, the U.S. government.
That is the thing that
the U.S. government running a grocery store. Who's ever heard of such a thing? Maybe these guys should go to a military base sometime. The U.S. government runs literally thousands of grocery stores around the world. They're restricted to military. They're a perk of being in the military. They charge a little bit less, I think, than the normal local supermarkets, and they're easy to deal with since they're on base and so forth. But like, it's not the end of the world, right? The U.S. government runs free schools. They run. I mean, the whole other thing. Someone
go buy alcohol in New Hampshire or Virginia
or here, right? Now look, it's not optimal. They should, in fact, not have these stupid ABC stores and just let Total Wine and Beverage sell everything. But it's not the end of the world. And again, free. Can you believe he's for the best? I liked what's his name? That guy who was on Morning Joe, Steve Ratner. Very upset on Twitter. List of the ridiculous things basically that Mamdani's for. Free CUNY, City University of New York tuition. Tuition was free at the City University colleges until 1975. My parents went to Brooklyn College and City College for free. Maybe they didn't have to. They could have paid a little bit. I mean, maybe it was inefficient. Their earnings ended up being higher than some of the people who were paying taxes to subsidize them. So blah, blah, blah. We should have more of a user fee. And I'm familiar with much of this liberal economics and sympathetic to a lot of it. On the other hand, we have free high schools. You know, we have basically free community colleges in a lot of states. Wouldn't be the end of the world to reduce the already low tuition for city colleges, which incidentally are a huge vehicle of upward mobility, a public good, a public positive externalities. You could even probably half justify it if you were, in strict economic arguments. Anyway, it's not like worth having a fit about, right? It just shows, in that respect, the reaction to, even the respectable reaction to Mamdani, let alone
it's insane.
Let alone that creep congressman, whatever his name is. What's his name? That guy Ogles or something?
Oh, yeah.
Who's just basically now just being racist and, everything in saying he should be deported.
They want to strip him of his citizenship.
Yeah, denaturalize him. As I said on I think on X, the anti-Mamdani stuff is so insane that it's making me more anti-Mamdani than anti-Mamdani. So that's kind of where I am. I think he could honestly, if he said a few things that just walked away from, and sincerely, hopefully, from the, being adjacent to some of the anti-Semitic stuff, the globalizing the Intifada. He said, of course, he believes that every New Yorker should be safe, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. And I think he would do that, in fact. And I don't think, in fact, New York's going to be the seat of pogroms if this guy's elected mayor. There are many powerful Jewish institutions in New York, and
I've heard that.
Yeah, right. So I think they can take care of themselves. And but having said all that, he's not my preference, and wasn't, and all that. And but yeah, the hysteria about it is just ridiculous. And look, and there he is, Tim Miller and I discussed on Tuesday night when we did the show. As the returns were coming in, and it was clear he's going to win big. Maybe people should learn more from his campaign and whine less about it, you know? Now, if they
That's
want to
what it
organize in
seems to
September
me.
to defeat him, incidentally, I'm not, he has no right to not be opposed in the general election. And if they can find a respectable candidate or maybe talk themselves back into Cuomo or Adams, I'm not, they have the right to do that too if they're in New York and they don't want to vote for Mamdani. Fine. But the whining, the hand wringing, the kind of finger wagging, I find a bit much.
All right,
And the
let me
refusal
ask-
to learn the lesson here, which really, if the lesson, one last point, I'm sorry, if the lesson is economic populism is popular, lefty economic populism, let's call it, which is really what he ran on. That's been very clear when I've now read more about the campaign, which I didn't follow that closely, what was happening, but, how much of the campaign was about prices, and accessibility of goods and services, housing costs. I mean, it's only one tick away from some of the centrist abundance agenda stuff if done somewhat differently. It could be moved in that direction. In any case, it's not actually the woke identity politics particularly that I don't like much and that our friends really loathe. He has been involved in that in the past, but he's been so involved in lefty Democratic politics in New York. But that's not what people seem to think they were voting for.
Correct.
And it's really, he had a disciplined campaign on these lefty economic populist issues. And I agree with you. If the price of defeating Donald Trump and having a big tent united Democratic Party is to have some lefty economic populist policies pursued by the mayor of New York and maybe even trickle over into the national Democratic agenda, fine. We'll be a little more social democratic and a little less neoliberal,
Yeah. So here's my So I was critical of Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey for running as focused on housing costs as she did. And my point was, you are promising a thing which you cannot possibly deliver. And Mamdani did the same thing. He just did it from the lefty perspective, right? I mean, his was, yes, there was build, but there was also some rent control aspects to it and mandating the affordable housing. But in general, I am sorry, New York City is always going to be an expensive place to live. New Jersey is always going to be an expensive place to live. And the only thing that makes those prices go down are recessions. And nobody wants a recession. And so, I mean, you can, and people who want to defend both of these people. So, but I get both the Democratic Socialists and the abundance people who are like, no, but if he could build 1 million housing units, wouldn't that put downward pressure on prices? And I was like, sure. If he could build 20 million housing units, but you can't. This isn't magic. You can't do that. You can build some and you can put some downward pressure, but the best you can do is slow the growth of housing costs. And so to campaign on, I'm going to lower housing costs is just, but also maybe this is just me being stupid. Like maybe the politics is always, you just promise people stupid shit like this and they sign on and they don't really believe it. They don't really expect it. Maybe like this with Donald Trump, right? Your grocery prices are going to go down. No, they won't.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the counter argument, obviously, as you made in the triad, is if it does catch up to you at some point, and if you have to run for re-election or your party gets judged by results, it can, if that matters anymore, it does some, I think. So yeah, you shouldn't make crazy or unrealistic promises. You know what? I mean, on the housing, just a couple of things. The housing thing is a little. Costs are very high. On the other hand, one reason costs are high because there are now, I believe, 8.8 million people living in New York, which is higher than it was 20 years ago. That's good, not bad for New York. I mean, you could be Detroit. You want to have really lower housing costs, lose half your population.
Right. Go to Detroit.
Be Cleveland, be Detroit, and have no pressure on housing. So people have to be a little more grown up about it. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say that. I'm not a 26-year-old trying to rent a place and so forth. So on the other hand, for a lot of people are benefiting from the rise in housing costs because they own their brownstone in Queens or whatever, and their row house in Queens, and it's doubled in the last 6-7 years, and that's their income and their working class families and so forth. So it's a little more mixed. Bloomberg did build a lot of housing. Joe and Delia, our son and daughter-in-law, lived in a 40-story apartment building in Long Island City before they had kids. Very easy commute out to the island for Delia and into the city for Joe on the subway. And that was nothing before Bloomberg. That was like empty land. It was tied up in zoning. It was a typical thing, right? It was like it hadn't been developed. It had been a waterfront. It was zoning fights. I don't even know, honestly. Bloomberg just said, this is crazy. This is extremely attractive land that people will go live there. And especially the younger people we want to attract to the city, blah, blah, blah. It's on the subway. And he basically cut through everything and built it. So be more like Bloomberg if you want to build more housing, honestly. And be a little less like, a lefty kind of rent control person, and that's just a practical fact, I believe, of public policy. But maybe the good news might be once you embrace the need for more housing, do you get pushed in a Bloombergian direction a little bit? If you're Mamdani and you're looking around 6 months in and you realize, gee, I can't really fulfill any of my promises unless I actually get some new, high rises built in parts that right now are tied up,
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
But he's an impressive guy.
So,
the other thing is the grudgingness. I mean, he ran a hell of a. He's a 33-year-old. He's a 2%. How many people go from 2% to 45%, 44%, whatever it was, and beat Cuomo, who's 35 points, starts out 30 points ahead of them? Anyone. I mean, that does not happen all the time in politics, and you just got to say that's impressive. And it doesn't mean he would be he's up to being mayor. It doesn't mean he knows enough to be mayor. It doesn't mean that he'd be a good mayor, but it does mean something, right? It's not, you know what I mean? So that's my other point.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you on that. Like the impulse to simply look at him and list all the things that are terrible about him, which is fine. Like you could do that too, but without first going, what could be learned? Like it does seem that there are lessons which are applicable, right? And they aren't the same line, right? You're not going to talk about rent control when you're running in Pennsylvania, but you can focus on housing affordability, right? You can do all this anyway. Okay, so we had another piece of news yesterday in the Senate. The Senate parliamentarian ruled that a bunch of Medicaid cuts in the big beautiful bill aren't kosher. Republicans are screaming and gnashing their teeth. So this is something Tim and I have been scratching our heads over, which is that if you're a Republican lawmaker, why do you care about cutting Medicaid? You're here to try to do all the stuff that rewards all of your friends. And if cutting Medicaid is going to hurt your voters or hurt Republican voters, well, you've already blown out the economics of this bill anyway. Who cares if it is 5 trillion of new debt versus 6 trillion of new debt? Like what, just give everything away to all of your constituents. I don't understand. Like,
right.
Do you understand what's going on with them?
Well, I think that's what Tom Tillis wants to do in North Carolina, and it's what the House Republicans, some of them want to do, and it's, as you say, reasonable from their point of view. Because Medicaid, is unusual cuts in the sense that it's actually real. I mean, that is to say, there are actual humans who have voted for, who are relatives who have voted for Tom Tillis, who are having costs paid for by Medicaid. And people, once you start navigating, as you know too, for the whole health insurance and healthcare system, both for the elderly but also parts of Medicaid, nursing homes and so forth, you become pretty aware of who's paying what, right? So this is not like an abstract. Now the debt is totally abstract. No, that's not going to hurt anyone. I wouldn't think at this point. Both parties are so complicit in it. The tax cuts are good for the Republicans, presumably, and even to the degree that they're for the middle class and working class. So I do think they're right to be most allergic to the Medicaid thing. But I don't quite understand. Why don't they just let them? Well, there are these weird reconciliation rules, but actually for that, I would just blow over the. I mean, they're being a little. I do agree they've sort of wrapped themselves around the axle. Plus, they have a few quote deficit hawks, I guess, who are legit in each body, who might hold the whole thing up if it blows up the deficit even more. I guess I don't know. They seem to have mishandled it in that way, though. They just assumed. I think there is a generation, and I kind of remember from 10, 15, 20 years ago, of Republicans who are, it's okay to be anti-Medicaid, you just can't be anti-Medicare. Because Medicare is our parents, their parents, and Medicaid is the poor people.
It's poor black people, right? People, yes. That's how they think.
Yes. They've sort of like woken up a little late to the fact that it's Medicaid has a lot more, people than that. And I think they got a little bit caught by surprise. The bill is really unpopular. I wrote about that this morning in Morning Shots. I mean, this new Quinnipiac poll, it's 29% favor, 55% don't or against, like 15, 16% don't know enough, something like that, are unsure. Also shows very high levels of knowledge about the bill, much higher than any other piece of legislation, really, in terms of having knowing a lot or knowing some, it's like 75%. People might lie a little bit when they answer that question, but still that they are answering it and picking that legislation is something they really know a lot about. So they know a lot. They really hate it. 29% in favor of the signature piece of legislation for a newly elected president and his majority party in Congress. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I mean, repealing Obamacare wasn't popular. Some of the stuff in the original tax cut wasn't popular in 2017, but that was more like 40%, 40, 50. That was more like the general approval rating of Trump, which is 41-54. Think of that. Trump's got 41% approval, there's only 29% approval of this bill. A lot of Trump voters are like, geez, what is this about, So I think it is a huge burden for them. The Democrats should hammer it. It's the biggest vote probably anyone in the House and probably anyone in the Senate is going to cast. Any Republican.
It's the only vote they will cast.
Right.
This
and
time.
they won't get that much credit if they're the 2 or 3 that vote against it. Because you just said, well, their party pushed this through, so you need to get rid of Susan Collins, even if she votes against it. And incidentally, there's a poll out from the University of New Hampshire. I think it's the University of New Hampshire, even though obviously Collins is in Maine. A poll showing Collins has like a 16% approval rating. This is from yesterday or something. I bet she doesn't even run again. Democrats could pick that up. But anyway, I think it's a real vote. You know what I mean? The other stuff is like they don't like this and they don't like that policy, which is also important. But this is an actual vote they can just hang around their neck. So I do think it's a big deal. Democrats could do a little more to highlight some bad parts of it. I'm obsessed with the immigration stuff. The bill like quintuples or something spending for ICE and for deportation and detention, really grotesque, which is not popular. So they're voting to spend more money. I mean, if you want to get on the kind of deficit hawk side of it, why are they throwing all this money at this bureaucracy that's producing masked people who are seizing gardeners off the streets and beating them up and putting them into trucks? And we hate the whole policy. And now you're just making it much more possible for them to do it, which incidentally, from a authoritarianism point of view, is very bad. Very bad. I mean, people are not focused enough on that. This bill is going to wildly increase the forces available to Donald Trump for various aspects of the deportation agenda, which is crucial to the authoritarian agenda, in my view. So that part really should be opposed even more. Anyway, I think just opposing this bill is very important on many things. And the Republicans have kind of got themselves in a bind, and we'll see what happens. They always seem to get these things through. But this is one where they can get it through. Fine, they'll get it through. It's probably better at this point getting it through for them than having it just collapse and then trying to put those pieces back together. On the other hand, once they got Obamacare through. That didn't do them much good in 2010, right? So,
here's the thing though. So I think about the big votes that are like unpopular. So Obamacare is the obvious one. The infrastructure vote, the American Rescue Plan vote under Biden, those things get unpopular because it's the government trying to give stuff away, and they are attacked for like, oh, the downstream effects of this giveaway will be bad. Right. And so people get worried about like, oh, okay, well, they're going to spend all this money. But this bill is the opposite in what it wants to do is take stuff away from people. And so, like, I don't even know I don't even understand what the sales pitch for it is from their perspective.
Well, you've seen there isn't
tax cuts.
There isn't tax cuts. Yeah, tax cuts. Yeah, tax cuts, and they're making a big bet that the anti-immigration stuff. They think that's popular, I guess, because Trump won on immigration, but I don't think it is. The Biden stuff, incidentally, I think you could argue that wasn't that unpopular, and the Democrats did okay in 2022, partly because voters were like a little mixed on that, and they got some bipartisan. It's also very important, if you can, to get some bipartisan support, because then it takes the edge off they're ramming this through. And what's your solution to this? The solution is to flip one of both bodies so they can't ram stuff through anymore. It's such an easy talking point for a Democrat running against an incumbent Republican or in a Republican seat, just to say, you can't let this happen again. And you know what? Whatever all the complexities of life and Mamdani and this and moderates and leftists and, the war powers and all, this is one thing we could really stop. And I do think voters have the sense, okay, you know what? We just put a Democrat in there. At least we buy ourselves a reprieve for the next 2 years. So I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. We got a whole bunch of stuff that I'm gonna surprise you with, especially on Iran, where I think I have won you over basically on Iran, but the rest of that is just for Bulwark Plus members. So look, come and subscribe. We paywall almost nothing. almost nothing. We paywall like the second half of this show in my newsletter. That's it. Come and help us keep the lights on. Come subscribe. Join Bulwark Plus.